Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm here with Darian Kovacs. Darian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Darian's got his cute cat mug, sipping whatever is inside of that cup. Looks like some tea.
It's a Mighty Leaf green and white tea mix.
Well, there we go. Darian is not the founder of a tea company. He's the founding partner of Jelly Digital Marketing and PR Agency. You've worked with some very well-known clients like Vistaprint, Lego, 7-Eleven, and many others. Your work has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Financial Post, and a whole collection of additional media. You started the business, I believe, in 2013, and you've built it up to a pretty impressive 18 team members. So we're going to dive into how you got to where you are today. We definitely want to explore how consultants can kind of apply some of these best practices to become more famous, to land more clients, to grow their businesses, to do it in a conscious and meaningful way. But before we do that, let's go back in time and have you share, what were you doing before you started Jelly?
Oh, so many things. I feel like my life was a adventure of discovery of where am I going. We just had a lunch day with our staff, and someone asked me what I studied at University of Victoria, and it was child and youth care. So I actually went to school to do art and play therapy, or in the hospital setting, it's called child life work. So I spent a year volunteering at Children's Hospital here in Vancouver on the oncology floor, and a year at a children's hospice in Vancouver called Canuck Place after our Vancouver Canucks. And then I discovered youth work. So I worked for both the city of Surrey and actually a church. And then at the time had been writing curriculum, which then they got published. And then I ended up running a publishing company. And then the curriculum got acquired by another organization out of the US. And then I was asked by a couple different US organizations to bring their brand organization to Canada, one being called Ashoka's Youth Venture, which was a social venture startup firm. So we gave $1,000 seed grants to 13 to 20-year-olds. And I worked for HarperCollins. They have an imprint called Zondervan, and they have an imprint called Youth Specialties. So I ran their youth worker events across Canada. And then I ended up working at a law firm that did charity, nonprofit, and foundation law. And they were building a fundraising software called Pure Giving. And then they built one called Chimp, which is now called Charitable Impact. And I worked on the marketing, fundraising, working with clients using the software side. And then 8 years ago, I realized with all this experience, all these, kind of mistakes along the way, adventures along the way, people I met along the way, I really wanted to do marketing and only marketing, because I realized even in the event world, the publishing world, software world, I really only loved the marketing side, and especially to do with PR and especially to do with digital ads and anything digital. So I had this great opportunity to start Jelly out of my basement here in Fort Langley, and that's how the party got started.
Yeah, so it's interesting because if you look at what you studied and kind of how you got started, really had very little to do with marketing and PR and digital and all that. If you break down your experiences of like to this, at that early stage, was there something in there or something that happened that made you latch on to marketing? Because when I look at many people who come from, let's say, a technical background or more of a nonprofit background, the idea of marketing is something that many people are not comfortable with because it's promotion. What happened to you, or what was going on in your life or your world that all of a sudden made you get excited about this idea of marketing?
I probably go back to high school, actually, when I was at high school in Tsawwassen, South Delta Secondary School. Our high school had a lot of great volunteer opportunities. So I volunteered at one point for a thing called Kids Help Phone. So if you ever buy Smarties in Canada, there's a little number you can call. If you're a kid, you can get help. And so they wanted a kind of a youth council to help decide how to grow this organization and this brand. I volunteered at the time Red Cross, was doing a ton of work with refugee work, so refugee awareness, refugee support. They also provided at the time blood services in Canada, but most of the volunteer work I did was on the refugee work, and they were doing like leadership symposiums and seminars. And I got really involved in that and was just kind of blown away by that world. My dad also happens to be a refugee who came from Hungary, and so I had some kind of lean towards learning about that world and what was still happening with refugees around the world. And then ICBC, which is the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, ran an event called Real Squared. Really excited about leadership in life. And these two twins, Almira and Jobina Bardai, created this youth team. And I was, I think, grade 10 at the time. And flash forward, actually, fun fact, Almira Bardai created a PR agency called Jive PR. And she's since, I think, sold her shares, and she's kind of an independent consultant now. But she was the one where I remember being like, you're 15, you're impressionable, and watching this incredible leader. And I want to say she was probably 20 at the time, but putting on an event, and then the minute you could get like press to cover it or the media to show up, I think that's where I learned that superpower was
Mm,
watching Almira do her thing. And so I think anything else I got involved with after this, like I volunteered with a thing called Youth Week, or, just tried to like, start things on campus at UVic. Like I started this underwater basket weaving club and then got an article about it. And I learned that the minute you have someone else talking about you and you have press talking about you, it takes up the seriousness and it kind of makes it real. And so I
right.
think I from an early age, I was fascinated by the power of the press and power of the media and what it can do for a brand, but more importantly, what it can do for a person and what it can do for movements that are good. If you have a good story to tell, you've got a good thing you want to kind of push forward, the media can be your best friend.
Well, you certainly don't sound like you grew up being an introvert. It sounds like you were out there a lot, networking, meeting with people.
Yeah.
Was that the case? Like, would you consider yourself to
Oh
be an
yeah.
extrovert,
Oh
or
yeah. Oh yeah. Big ENFP over here.
and how do you think that's helped like your development as an entrepreneur, as a business owner? Is that something that if you look back over the progression of your business, that attending networking events, meeting a lot of people, having a lot of conversations, being involved with charities, nonprofits, do you think that has helped your business and kind of where you are today?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One is volunteering for things and going to places where I knew no one was so great because I think I know what it's like quite deeply emotionally to show up to an event and know no one. And so
Mm,
I've learned to kind of feel the rooms where it's like, how do you find the person in the room who's maybe alone or doesn't know anyone? And like, because I've been there so often. And then secondly, I think I learned that there's so much good in the world. I think in a world where there's so much bad and evil and you hear about it and see it, I think that flip side of like, there's some really good people who want to change the world. There's some really good people who want to do good and trying to find those people. And so flash forward, and I don't mind sharing, this is probably like the number one secret, if you want to say, secret to the success of jelly
mm,
marketing. If we want to explain that, I would say, early on, and this was maybe like the best and or worst decision we ever made as a company, but like our first year, like we had no money, we barely had any clients. Like we're, your first year doing anything, right? But I volunteered our services to like I found like what are the 5 most expensive charity galas in Vancouver, which is kind of our original kind of geographic scope of area we wanted to serve. And so I went to them and said, "Hey, I want to volunteer. You need a video done. I'm going to do it for you." And they're like, "Well, what's the value?" And I was like, "Well, what do you think the value is?" And they said, "Well, we'll put you in at a gold sponsor, or we'll put you in here as a diamond sponsor." And so I'd show up to these events, and they would also give us, tickets at the table. And sometimes this was the best part. We actually have jelly jars as our business card, and they would let me put jelly jars at all the tables, or I would do the gift bag for the event, and they would walk away like the Jewish Community Center, the JCC gal. They'd walk away, and they'd all get a jelly jar and a water and a cookie. And again, from there, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't misleading, but people had the assumption and idea that jelly was massive. Like we were
mm.
up there with like Dilawri Group and RBC and Scotiabank, which we're literally like a 2-person shop out of, at this point, it was a basement. And then we were in literally the storage closet of a web agency called Domain 7 out in Abbotsford. And so we're trekking out from Abbotsford to do this work. But I think what I loved about it was it also aligned us with clients that want to do good in the world. Like I remember the first meeting with a guy, and I don't mention it. It was a dinner I sponsored, and at the meal, and it was actually funny. He's like, "Oh, my wife was there." He's like, "All right, let me meet your wife," and he goes, "Oh, wait, let me see her wedding ring." And I was like, "Totally, I got it on Etsy. It's amazing." And I was like, and it's not even it was like we used our engagement ring as the wedding ring. It's great, man. You totally got to check out Etsy, man, for if you ever need a wedding ring. It's great. And he's like, "Oh, I work for a company called Spence Diamonds, and which is Canada's largest seller of engagement and rings and whatnots." And then we met though. He's like, I want to meet with you. Let's meet up next week. We're looking at doing some marketing, some work. And so in the first meeting, I remember him saying, you know what I like about this is like, I like knowing that we've got similar values because of where we met.
Mm,
He
yeah.
articulated it so well. And so that created two things. One, it was gave us our biggest growth trajectory because it put me in front of the right people at the right place at the right time. And it just gave our brand huge recognition
Yeah.
and way bigger than we were supposed to. And then secondly, we were able to align and work with some brands that had really good values that we wanted to work with.
There's so much to unpack there. I want to take us back to that moment when you started the company in your basement.
Yes.
You said we. So who was it?
So it was originally there was a group of investors that were looking to invest in a bunch of companies, and we were one of them. And
Okay.
so I had kind of had like a side hustle app company going, and they're like, hey, we want to invest in this, and we want to get going, and we're going to have all these companies that we're going to work with you. So we were one of a group of people that they were working with to help get going. Um,
How long
I've
did that
since
last?
they about 3 years, I want to say
Okay.
3 years. Yeah. And then, so we bought them out, which was great. But at the time it was, I was able to get one employee. Name was Chris Montgomery. He was amazing. And he was kind of this incredible jack of all trades. He was a videographer, designer, photographer. And it was the two of us just kind of like working away to try to grow this agency.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so you started off not as an agency. Initially, the idea you were kind of running some app kind of project business idea, and then somebody said, "Hey, we want to fund a bunch of different apps or businesses. You're one of them." And then where did the idea come from? Taking like going from an app business to an agency business.
Yeah. So what happened was, while I was working at the law firm, I was doing apps on the side, and probably on like the 15th app, I was so frustrated and so sad because these people would launch this app and they put their heart and soul to it, and then no one would download it. Like maybe their aunt would download it, and maybe they would, maybe they'd even forget to. And
Yeah.
so I made a mandatory package. You had to buy from Jelly. At the time, it was called something else. You had to buy a one part PR, one part social media, and one part digital ads. You had to buy that package, and it was $750. So I would allocate $250 per bucket, and you had to buy it for 3 months. So every app, was whatever 2250 was added on to all of the apps we did going forward. And I realized I love that part of the apps way more.
Mm,
And what was happening in the app world was that Apple and Android was creating all these templates. So if you wanted a basic app, anyone could really do it. You didn't really need a developer anymore. And so we realized that that's getting commoditized. So let's just focus on the service packages that are way more fun, way more interesting, and something that I'm really good at.
got you.
Versus, anyone could build an app right now,
Right.
and literally WYSIWYG can do it.
So 3 years into this business, you buy out this other company. That sounds really interesting, but there's so much more that I want to go
Yeah.
into. Uh, Taking us back again to the beginning of the early days in the basement. So you got some funding, you had an investor, you brought on one employee.
Yep.
How did you go out and get your first clients? And were the first clients essentially the people that were using the apps, like they were coming to you for the apps, and so that was the initial service, or like beyond that, once
Yeah.
you said, okay, we're formally gonna
Yeah.
start to operate as an agency,
Yeah.
where did you get those first few clients from?
Yeah. So I think we kind of like hung over like two that were still on that 3 month package. I had
Right.
two of those packages going. And then once we kind of like officially hung our hat up and said, hey, here's Jelly, this is who we are. Um, a lot of the folks that we had those packages with either wanted to, continue the packages, or they came back and said, hey, I love that that's all you're doing now. Can I do this package, but do it bigger?
Mm,
Or they told friends and family about what we were doing. Another one that kind of gave us a nice big push was there's the local business improvement association. So I went there and I basically went to Costco, if you could say. So I went to the BIA and said, hey, I want to do 15 videos for your members, and I'll only charge you, because you're buying 15, I'll charge you, $200 a piece type of thing. Right. So we sold these like really cheap Costco deals.
mm,
But it was great because it gave us an incredible portfolio base. It did bring us in revenue. And then from there, while we were, kind of finding clients and lifting up every rock, to discover these clients, we had work coming in. And then it was just those charity galas and charity events kind of post afterwards. We did a fun thing too, where if you got one of our jelly jars, we actually put a website on there called PB and Bread, and you could actually order a loaf of peanut butter and bread. And so that gave us accountability to see, okay, how well did people engage with our jelly jars at those
Just
events?
tell me more about that, because
Yeah.
I have a note down about this. That yeah, you send people, or you give people these little jelly jars,
Yes. Yes.
and so now give me the connection of like, who are you? Were you sending it to people? Was it only at the kind of
It was
charity
like
and
my
gala
business card.
events?
It was, yeah, it was charity galas, and it was my business card. So I'd see them in
Okay.
person, I'd give it to them, or it would be like it would be the favor at all these charity events.
Okay. So they get that, and then inside of
The
the jar,
label,
or
on the
there's a
label.
label, and it
Yeah.
says to go and get your loaf of bread or peanut
Yeah.
butter.
Yeah.
Go to this website.
Yeah.
And did people do that?
Oh
Did
yeah. Oh
actually?
yeah. I just shipped off actually last week three packages, like sourdough, 2 whole wheat, and then one wanted crunchy, one wanted smooth, and one wanted like a peanut butter alternative. So
And how often are you finding that people that are doing this actually turn into paying clients?
yeah, it's typically like they think it's hilarious and then they share about it online, and then those that have ordered the peanut butter bread typically do not become paid clients, but they typically introduce us to paid clients, or they talk about us to paying clients, or they
Yeah.
and then again, same thing with the charity guys. Like I can say I've met personally, like directly, like the Spence Diamonds guy directly at these events. And a lot of the times it's even when we go to a pitch, or we show up at an event, someone's like, oh, I've seen you guys before. I've seen jelly before. Ah, I like it. And they have a good feel. And that's the other thing, emotionally. And we're talking about emotions here all of a sudden. Emotionally, they associate jelly with a good thing because they're at a charity gala doing good things. And so going into that pitch meeting, it was a good thing. It was a good feeling.
Where does that come from? Because as I'm seeing, and I'll ask the question, because where does that come from doesn't mean anything. But when I think about what you are describing and talking about, you're making an intentional decision to invest money into
Yes.
these little jars,
Yes.
into jelly, into all this stuff that you're setting up before you know that it's going to
Oh
work.
yeah.
Like
Oh
you
yeah.
probably had the goal, right, and hope that it would work, but you didn't know that. Many entrepreneurs, many agency owners, consultants are very risk averse.
Yes.
They're conservative. They don't want to spend money on marketing.
Yeah.
They'll do whatever they can to kind of cut corners and try and grow their business without making that kind of investment. But here you are on the exact opposite side of the table saying, no, we're going to put money into something because we believe that it will work.
Yes.
And it does pay off. Where does that come from for you? Where did you learn that lesson?
So three things. One, I love slow cookers. I love uh, putting a meat in a slow cooker and cooking it all day, like 8, 9 hours, right? And it's gorgeous. And my brother smokes beef, makes these briskets. He lived in Texas for a long time, and just slow cooking food is so good. So it's the idea of like, there's this magazine called Fast Company. So it's the idea of like slow company. What does it mean to like actually go slow in business and nurture things, and just kind of like I actually, after my first year of university, I came home and my mom let me do this big garden in our backyard. And I love everything about fruit and vegetable gardening because you just wait. Most of the time, gardening is just waiting.
Yeah.
And there's this amazing story of the idea of even the olive tree. You know, the olive tree, a lot of people would plant little baby olive trees, knowing that their generation, that they themselves will never taste the olives themselves, but they plant the olive tree for that next generation. So it's that.
But Darian, where I know you said there's three things, but where does
Yeah.
that come from? Like, how did you get to that place? Because in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
in business, the typical business owner is rushing, right?
Yes.
We want results quickly. We want
Yeah.
things to happen now.
Yeah.
When did you start to connect those dots and actually see, as long as I plant the right seeds,
Yeah.
if I'm patient and
Yeah.
consistent,
Yeah.
I will be able to reap the fruit of my labors. But
Yeah.
when did that happen for you? When did you see kind
Yeah.
of connect those dots?
Yeah. Summer 2000, came home after a first year university, and I built this garden, a fruit and vegetable garden. And every night I tend to it. On the weekends, I tend to it. And it was that taught me of like, if you want good stuff, you just have to wait, wait and wait. And, and there's all these sayings like good things come to those who wait, but it's true though, on so many levels.
Yeah.
And then,
So that was number one. You said there was
yeah.
two others, right?
So number two, the idea being is, let's just say there's an old saying. It's like, kill two birds with one stone. I prefer the less violent version, which is feed two birds with one grain. And so the idea being is, even if the charity gala was useless, no one picked up a jelly jar. They threw the jelly jars in the garbage. I don't know, for some reason the charity gala was actually a bust, and there's a bad, whatever. I at least knew that I did something good for charity. I at least knew that like something really cool happened to help the world. And so at least I could sleep well at night, knowing that we did something cool versus just buying a random billboard or
Right.
find something else. And then the third thing being the idea of operating in faith versus fear. So I think in every decision we make, whether even, coming on this podcast with you, or, showing up to a meeting early, or, deciding to mail a thank you card to someone at random, like those are all decisions. You can either send a thank you card in fear, which is fine. It still gets it done. Or I could show up to the show in fear of like, well, if I don't show up, Michael's going to not like me and it'll go horrible. And, there's all these, it's the human emotion inside of us. But if you operate, I think I'm trying to figure out, how do I, each day when I wake up, how do I operate in faith? How do I
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm going to come on the show. I don't know what's going to come of it. I don't know what's going to happen with Michael and I. I don't know what's going to happen when I write that thank you card. It may not even go. Like Canada Post may lose it, which they probably won't, but they could, right? But go operating in faith that something good will happen from this.
I think that's so powerful because very often what I observe is that those who have a mindset of fear or scarcity tend to not even take the action. So you start to think, well, like what if I spend all this time writing all these thank you cards, sending them out, or donating, and I don't generate business? Is it really worth it? And then you don't take that action, then you never know whether or not it would work, right? So having that abundance mindset, or as you call it, the faith mindset of just being able to move forward and take that chance, right? I think it's such a powerful dynamic that so many people miss because they're over analyzing, overthinking, looking at everything that could go wrong. And that's what actually holds them back from taking the action that could prove to them that it actually could work out very well for them.
Yeah, there's a seed. It's got a mustard seed. I know we eat mustard on our hot dogs, and there's mustard probably in your fridge right now, but the seed of the mustard tree is so tiny, but the tree itself is massive, right? And so I still like, I think maybe that's the philosophy of like little things, like saying hello to that person at the event, right? Or walking over to that person, like walking over in faith, that little encouragement to them, or bringing them a glass of water, right? They looked sweaty and awkward at this event, but what if you brought them a glass of water, right? But operating in that little mustard seed, that could turn into something really cool, but not with the intention of selfishly, because I want something in return because I gave them a glass of water, but just operating in faith that like, that's probably a good thing to do because they're hot and
Mm,
sweaty.
yeah. You do a lot of work with all types of different companies. You're very knowledgeable about, multiple industries from a marketing, PR, digital perspective. Thinking about what you've seen with your own company as a professional services firm, as well as other professional services firms, what type of marketing or approach are you seeing and do you believe works best today to generate engagements and conversations with with clients and buyers as a professional services firm? What do you think people should be thinking about? What should they be looking
Yeah.
into and considering?
Yeah, and I'll add to it of what I wish I had doubled down on earlier. So
Perfect.
number
Yeah.
one, e-newsletter. And I say e-newsletter because, we had an experience recently where Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp went down for a day. And the reality is any social channel you're on, and I love LinkedIn, and, there's some incredible channels out there, but you are literally on leased land. Growing up in Tawasin, there's a big part of land where I know some friends lived on, where they're on 100-year leases with the Tawasin First Nations band. And it's awesome, right? They own the house, they just don't own the physical land beneath their feet. And that's okay, and it's a great place to live, and those channels are awesome. But if you want to kind of own your land, own your property, e-newsletter is the place to go. And I wish I doubled down on that earlier.
Yeah.
I think the
I think
big thing.
it's a really great a piece of advice. I think very often people are not considering, right? Building that list and as early as you can. It's really, really great. Okay. What else?
Yeah, and video. I think just I wish I'd done more videos earlier. And I've been trying on my own YouTube channel and all that stuff, but I just think putting those videos out there, because then it even gives you a chance to like consolidate your thoughts and your thinking, um, and having done those videos. But I think more importantly, and where honestly I'll give you the second place where we got more clients from than anywhere else has been education and education. So the minute we started doing workshops and webinars for associations,
Mm-hmm.
night and day difference. So we
Okay.
would literally, any time I'd do a workshop or a webinar for an association, I would see two qualified, warm leads come in. We'd get the meeting, and it would, like, 9 times out of 10, they turn into a paid client.
So
And
let's kind of break that down a little bit.
sure.
let's say the consulting firm owner that goes,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
I can I
I
can
like that you're
deliver.
getting practical here, Michael. This is great. I
Oh,
love that you're like, you're not going to let me get away with by just saying education. Let's move on to the next live, laugh, love. Right?
there's plenty of places that people can go to get those high level ideas. I like to deliver value for the community, everybody that's joining us and so forth. So here you're talking about associations.
Mm,
If I'm a consulting firm
yeah.
owner,
Yeah,
right?
which is what which I am, and I reached out. So I literally reached out to the. Oh my, it depends how like desperate I was, or hungry I was, or full of faith I was, whatever. I would reach out to like the education person. I'd find the association website, reach out to the
Yep.
education person, pitch them, and say like, hey, I have a workshop. Here's the description. Here's the key learning objectives of said
Mm,
workshop. Here's my fee, but I can do it for free. Here's some worksheets they can get along with it. Here's my experience in this field.
okay.
And so that's what I pitch. And then they would either say yes or no. And if they said yes, that was great. If they say no, I'd keep trying and say, what would it take for me to be able to do
Right.
this?
What would you say your response rate was? Like if somebody was to send 10 emails to people, like in your experience, are you getting all 10 back? Are you getting 5 back? Like how many people are actually responding to these kind of
Yeah,
requests?
I'd get 5 back and 3 to 4 would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you keep going. Yeah. And
Yeah,
just keep,
totally. And then to the point where I ended up getting, I, um, I hosted an event as well. We hosted an event. And so we booked speakers, and one of the speaker agents was like, hey, I've got a speaker. They can't do this job because they're not paying enough for her. Would you do it? And I was like, yeah, obviously. He goes, and he goes, well, do you need another fee? I was like, no. So he just gave me this job to do a workshop, and I got paid. And I was like, you're going to pay me to do a workshop? This is amazing. Like, cause I don't mind if he hears this, but I would totally have done it for free. And he knows that, but I go and
yeah.
do this workshop. And again, same thing would happen. We get clients that would come from that. But I think what was cool is that it was awesome to be able to actually start getting paid to
Mm,
do biz dev.
right.
And but then I continue to try to like, hey, how do we continue to provide this value and this service in kind of like bite-sized versions? Um, and I, yeah, like honestly, those two things, charity galas and education, like giving away as much resource as possible. And I think what I did was I just put my heart and soul into those workshops as well, because it was like what you said, there's a ton of speakers that do like, here's some high level ideas and you need me for the rest. I'd be like, hey, here's 10 things you can do today, literally, and give them like a roadmap and action stuff. And so why I think the leads were so qualified is the person was like, hey, I could do it all, and he taught me how to do it all, and I know exactly what needs to happen, but I don't want to do it. Let's
Right.
just pay them to do it.
Yeah. So when you're delivering that workshop or that online webinar,
Yeah.
are you making a call to action at the end of that? Are you telling people, hey, if you'd like, we can help you? Like,
No,
okay, so you're
absolutely
shaking
not.
for those that
And
are just
no,
listening,
yeah, yeah,
you're shaking
no.
your head saying no.
And
So
most of them you're
tell us,
not even allowed to. They actually ask
yeah,
you not to and say it's against policy. Like like a TEDx talk, you can't do that, right? So it's
right,
like say I kind of just go there, and it's almost better that way because it's like, hey, I'm gonna just be generous here, and
right.
again, operate in faith.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So no sales pitch, no direct call to action. You're just delivering and over delivering, giving real
Yeah,
specifics. Because it's another thing that many people kind of think about: how much should I give? What if I give too much, and then they don't need my expertise or services? But what you're saying is,
give it all.
the person who's actually going to buy is the person that even if you gave them the blueprint,
Yeah.
they don't have the time or the desire, right, or resources to implement themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's basically, you think of it like you're doing a job interview on the spot. You're doing a pitch on the spot of like, here's what I would do if I were working for your firm. Like, here's what
Yeah,
I would do if I was to give away my whole plan.
right. So today, 18 people, right? You've gone from one yourself and one other person to now 18. Uh, what did that progression look like? And what I'm really wondering as well, Darian, is did you hire people before you needed them, right? So that you would have the capacity and ability to take on more work, or did you typically wait until you had money in the bank or a proposal confirmed and then go out and hire people? Like, how do you think about and how did you navigate that kind of hiring chicken and egg type of process?
Yeah. So two things. I think earlier days we were making more mistakes and kind of just hiring in faith and again operating in faith, and maybe that's where faith is not a great thing all the time to kind of overhire sometimes. But usually we'd find the work to do, and which was great, but it was just a little more intense as far as like finding the work to feed the agency.
Yeah.
Um, which provided cases where I said yes to work I shouldn't have said yes to, which is again probably one of our lessons
What do you
learned.
mean by that? Just explain that a little bit more. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd love to
I
hear
like I
you
like I'd
elaborate.
say yes to a job that was like not like 'cause our big thing is we get leads for clients, and if a client wasn't clear on how many leads they want, exactly what they need done, timeline, and if it was a bit more muddled, like that doesn't work for us. So until they have a really clear strategy in place and a plan, and so we'd still say yes to just jump right in because I was like, well, I got a baby to feed, I got an agency to feed here. So so then learning from that was okay. We just need to, you know, kind of go slowly and until the work is there, until we've kind of like hit capacity, 80 to 90% capacity on our existing staff. Okay, then we go and hire, or we can bridge it with a contractor until we can
Mhm.
hire a full-time staff. And then our big thing too, we also learned was, you know, not taking on any clients that were more than 10% of our revenue, because again, they become a sugar mama, sugar daddy that, you know, you have to say yes to everything. And, you know, they say jump and we say how high. So again, lessons learned along the way. But I think the biggest kind of hiring piece was um, really hiring for the culture of like people that were humble and had humility, and a bit of cross training as well. We found out some of our staff could do two different roles in the company, so we
Mhm.
cross trained them for a bit until we kind of could fill that gap.
Got you. And how has your role in the business changed? I mean, you likely went from being very much a doer and
Yeah.
implementer, delivering like, you know, doing a little bit of everything, if not a lot of everything, to today as a CEO, as a leader in the company. Where do you kind of spend your time, and how has that kind of changed or evolved over the last several years?
Yeah. You know what? I'm still doing biz dev. Like I'm still the only biz dev like bottleneck for that world, just because I'm like trying to filter, you know, are you a bad fit for our agency, which is very hard to outsource for. And then the other ones being, do you need training? Because we have a training arm to our organization, or do you need us to actually do the work? And
Mm,
what is it that we can do for you? So that's been where most of my time goes. And then on the education side, developing that education resource that we have at Jelly. Uh, and then, yeah, having an operations person has been incredible. So we work in tandem, whether it's in our contracts and in our hiring process, but she takes lead on, you know, figuring that stuff out and
yeah.
deciding what's best for the company. So, yeah, I'd say the biz dev hasn't changed. I'm just probably, and also we've created the company to be more boring. So we've created more systems and processes. So there's a bunch more like standard operating procedures for, you know, out of office messages to um, when a client wants to change their contract. So we've built these things so it's less reactive, which has been great. So I'm having to put out less fires, which is
Right.
good. So still
Yeah.
every once in a while I'm still jumping in to try to fix and adjust. But I'm still involved in some of the creative direction or some of the strategy, but it's less reactive, which is very nice. It's a nice way to be.
So Jelly offers a lot of different types of services. You also have your new kind of, or new-ish, the Jelly Academy kind of digital course, micro credentials school. In addition to PR and, you know, digital ads, classic marketing. Like there's a lot of stuff, a lot of different services and products that you have, you kind of offer and have. How do you manage all of that? I mean, is it, do you find that overwhelming at times because you have so many different ways to work with clients? And if not, how have you put systems, or like what's kind of the secret sauce to running all of that in a smooth and efficient way?
Yeah. We have a really great, like kind of call it like an Excel sheet format where we have an account manager who will manage it and kind of what the service offerings are every month and how many hours of those service offerings. And then we have it by department. So we have a, you know, SEO department, you know, digital ads department, social media department, PR department, multimedia department. And then the account managers, essentially our orchestra directors, you know, kind of tasking out the work to each of those departments who are assigned to said client, and
Mm,
it works quite well, and you know, and it flows well, and we have these operating procedures of what it looks like to onboard a client, what it looks like to delegate the work to the coordinators on the team. And there's a few things. Well, I was like anything web, like we typically have web partners that are outsourced. Anything kind of podcasts, we have a podcast producer partner. Um, so those are kind of we're managing an outside vendor,
mm,
but the rest it's all inside vendors. So it's actually quite nice. So and our staff is hybrid right now, so half in at half out at different times. But Slack's been great for it. We use a tool called Basecamp, so Basecamp 2, which has been amazing. And then we hacked Basecamp, so we do everything as a task. It's either 1 to 4. 2 is it's due that day by end of day. 3 is this would be good to do by this day, end of day. 4 is like just think about this for this date. And 1 is like, which we should only really have 1 to 2 to 3 ones a week at most, maybe 1 a week, is where drop everything. This is just got to do
Urgent.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Basecamp's been amazing that way, and even our coordinators love it because it's very clear expectations on what needs to be done in their week load.
Yeah. So I mean that project management tool has been around for a long time. It's really great that you have. I mean, one thing that I take away from that is you have a very thoughtful process, or you've done likely a lot of thinking around how to manage your system, how to stay on top of projects, and obviously how to deliver great work for clients. What we're going to want to talk about to make sure that people can learn more about the work that you guys do and where to go. But before we do that, just a few kind of questions before we wrap up. The first is, when you look at your typical day and your typical week, what are 1 or 2 things that, we'll call them habits, that you have that you feel kind of give you your superpower, that allow you to accomplish more, to be successful, to be positive, whether it's the morning green smoothie and like something along those lines, or exercise or reading or journaling. Like what do you do on a consistent basis, Darian, that you feel really plays a big role in the success that you have?
I'd say it's plugging in my laptop plug. So I will take my laptop and charger home. Actually, I just finally just got a second plug, and so I've stopped doing it. So maybe this isn't fitting, but it's the idea being is, so I'd have to bring my laptop back to the office, and then I'd have to crawl, bend down at my desk, get on my knees, and plug it in. So
Yeah.
I think that action of just knowing that, getting down on the knees and saying, I'm not God. Like I'm not
But
everything.
what do you mean by that? You mean that just because it's harder for you to plug in a computer, there's a separation between the like doing work and not doing work, or something else?
No, more just like I just using it as a funny thing. Like I'd literally have to get down my knees and plug in things, but it was a nice physical reminder of just like maybe a prayerful reminder or a meditative reminder, um, of just that, like, I'm not God. And I think all throughout the day of like, I'll try to get these moments of like, whether it's listening to music, like certain songs, um, there's some incredible, songs out there, or, read this thing called the Psalms, or the Proverbs. Again, if you're in business, Proverbs are incredible wisdom in there. So I think I just try to, find strength and wisdom outside of myself, and
Mm,
getting down on the knees to plug in plug in the thing actually was a good reminder each day.
right.
Maybe I got to find a new one now that I finally bought a second plug-in thing.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of power around you that you are focused on. So that's great. How about last 6 months? Best book, fiction, nonfiction, that you've read or listened to?
Oh man, I got in this John Grisham kind of bend for a while, so I read so many John Grisham novels. But okay, I finally read Scott Galloway's Post Corona, which was incredibly inspiring, and then Seth Godin's latest. I want to say, I can't remember what it was called, but it was really good.
The orange one, the this is marketing or something, or
No,
that
it's
one, or
brand new, brand new. It's all
oh,
about like producing work, and it's
oh,
the practice,
not the practice. Yeah,
the
right.
practice. So good. It's meaty and chewy. So though, and Scott Galloway's, it was so neat to read them kind of just after each other after reading so much John Grisham. John Grisham's great. It's a fun read. It's like cotton candy. And then I went over and read some like steak and potato books, which was great. And I'm still processing stuff from Seth and Scott Galloway's books still to today, as far
Yeah.
as like content and ideas, and so much good stuff in there.
Awesome. We'll put those resources into the show notes. And then last but not least, most important even, Darian, where can people learn more about you and the work that Jelly is doing?
Yeah, I'm so stoked on our Jelly Academy right now. So like jellyacademy.ca is one of my favorite things. We're actually just about to graduate a new cohort of 54 students, of which over 40 of them are Indigenous, which is really cool. So we actually were able to scholarship a lot of these students, and so we're going to see over 40 Indigenous people go into the marketing sector in the next month, which is very cool. And thanks to the amazing people at Best Buy, any of those students that did not have the proper hardware, laptop and or cell phone, they shipped them a brand new one to kind of break that barrier. to give them opportunity and jobs. So,
Very cool.
and yeah, and what I love about it is a ton of people are getting their credentials, and those that are been in marketing a long time are getting their credentials now, much like Michael Ross from Suits. He operated as a lawyer, but without having passed the bar. In digital marketing now, all these people are realizing we should go and pass the bar. So we help people get their Google, Facebook, and Hootsuite certs. But otherwise, yeah, jellyacademy.ca, jellymarketing.com is our agency work. And that's where I could be. And anywhere like LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn. I'm there and I'm respond to anything and everyone. And same thing with like Facebook, Instagram. I think that's where else. I think that's all that I am. Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter. The Twitter's verse.
It sounds like people can find you in multiple different places.
Quora. I'm on Quora. I had to stop being on Reddit though. I put a little Reddit ban on my computer because I was on Reddit too much. But I think that's every. Where else is there? Where else is there to be, Michael?
No, that's it. That's more,
Twitch?
Darren. That's more than enough.
Twitch.
Stop it already. Let's stop it. That's enough. Take it easy. Control yourself. Listen, man, it's been a lot of fun having you on. Thanks so much for sharing and just giving people a look, a little peek inside of the Jelly story. Really great takeaways and ideas. I hope that everybody can consider, if not embrace, applying in their business. So thanks again.
Fax machine. I'm gonna get a fax number and I'll try to get that over to you.
Awesome, man.